Hello, and welcome to the Virtual U.S. Attorney Podcast with Hira Rehman. In this podcast, we will cover a wide range of issues that revolve around different types of law, bringing you the latest legal topics and observations from experts in the legal profession. You are listening to The Eminent Marketing. This episode is now in session.
Hello, Rachel. So excited to have you back on the Virtual U.S. Attorneys Podcast. For those of you joining us for the first time, Ms. Rachel Virk has been litigating since 1990. She is a certified mediator since 2001. Her office is located in Sterling, Virginia. Rachel is the author of The 4 Ways of Divorce, which is a complete how-to guide that can be extremely useful in multiple situations that an individual can face during divorce. Welcome back, Rachel.
Hello, Hira. So good to see you again.
I'm looking forward to continuing our conversation on the emotional aspects of divorce. So, Rachel, what are your thoughts about the emotional aspect when people face conflict when going through a divorce?
I would say about half the time, the process of creating a new life path or a new two-home family is rather amicable and not high conflict. But even people going through a low conflict divorce are dealing with emotions of fear and uncertainty, fear of the unknown, uncertainty as to what is best, and don't know how to figure out all the details, which can be really complicated. For those going through a less amicable or more difficult divorce, the process can be downright hard. These people have to understand that the journey will not be easy.
You mentioned the words high conflict. Can you tell us your views about it? What factors can increase conflict or cause it?
The factors that seem to create high conflict is if one or more parties is motivated to engage in that conflict for various reasons or sees a need to protect themselves or their children, and if in litigation has the funds and a willing attorney who wants to engage in that conflict. My personal view is that if a couple has children, they should be thinking about those children first. Every single situation is different, and we have to look at what impact a party's actions are having on those children. In working through the process, there are some people who are simply not used to standing up and articulating and fighting for their needs and wants. Other people are very used to creating difficult situations in order to get their way. We have to look at each aspect of the conflict to come up with an appropriate way of dealing with each individual event. But the guiding principle should always be what is the right thing to do. Revenge, expressing anger, and getting even should not drive the process.
You're right. I have come across a lot of questions and have seen examples where the feelings of revenge, anger, and pure hatred have further complicated the process. It really takes a toll on mental health and well-being. So since you are practicing for more than 30 years now, you would have seen a lot of cases where there's a conflict in a marriage. What considerations are there when the parties have children?
Often I see people who feel like they should stay in a bad marriage, quote, for the sake of the children, quote. Some think it is better for the children to have two parents around. Some are afraid that if they separate from their spouse, they won't see their children as much as they would like to. And some won't move on because they're putting a value on what they perceive as financial security.
So what would you tell a client whose children see them fighting with their ex-to-be?
When there is fighting, these people either don't see their very small children literally putting their hands over their ears, or don't realize that the effect of all that dysfunction upon those children as they teach them what a marriage should not be. Or they're so wrapped up in their own drama that they just don't care. A small apartment full of love with one parent is healthier for everyone than a great big house full of anger and abuse in a gated community.
Well, we all know that couples who have children together are going to face custody issues. What would you tell a client who is afraid to leave because they think they are going to lose their children?
When the children are exposed to conflict, the conflict needs to be removed. Sometimes that means separating and going to court to fight for time with the children. Yes, each party will no longer see the children every single day, but the children are no longer being taught that being abusive or tolerating abuse is acceptable. They just need to fight for their time with them.
That's right. Rachel, do you ever have clients who say they don't want to get separated because they have to be present with the child all the time to protect them from the other spouse?
Yes, I do understand that it is not easy to leave an abusive, controlling spouse, male or female. I do understand that many people feel that others don't really know what's going on behind closed doors and may not believe them, such as a judge. The decision has to be made to weigh the emotional costs of staying versus leaving and what those costs are on the children either way.
And apart from the factor of abuse, what do you tell the clients who don't want to get a divorce for financial reasons?
We have to consider all of the reasons to stay together or separate. Sometimes staying together, if there is no conflict or little conflict, or the children are not exposed to the conflict, makes some sense, especially if it is for a very limited, defined period of time, such as until a house sells. Sometimes it makes more sense to separate and get going in a career. Every situation is different.
That is absolutely true. Every situation is unique, and there are different factors regarding, like, every case has different factors. Can you share some general thoughts on the conflict of divorce?
Conflict brings out the best or the worst of a person's character, and the children are watching. Divorcing parents are teaching their children how to deal with conflict, whether to hold their head high, work towards what they feel is right, do what they have to do, or try to get even, pay back, and hurt the other person out of anger. Sometimes there is outright greed and pettiness with unreasonably high financial demands or unreasonably low offers. Sometimes there is parental alienation by a jealous spouse whose partner left him or her for someone else and wants to punish them by turning the children against them. Again, divorce, like any conflict, shows a person's true nature.
Yes, we often get to see the real version of an individual in the hardest situations or where there's conflict. So let's discuss the court process. Can you tell us, what do parties involved have to deal with?
There is an enormous amount of work required to properly prepare for the final custody hearing and the final divorce hearing. In Northern Virginia, those are separate hearings about a month apart, and the work can include preliminary matters such as a motion to prohibit the dissipation of assets, a motion to prohibit relocating with the children, restraining orders due to domestic violence, compelling the production of documents and other information from the other party, temporary support hearings, depositions, maybe hiring private investigators or expert witnesses to perform a home appraisal, a vocational analysis, a business valuation, motions, objections, subpoenas, preparing for and attending pretrial conferences, putting together trial notebooks for each hearing, preparing or rehearsing witnesses and party testimony for each and every hearing, and attending and testifying at the final custody hearing and the final support and property hearing.
Wow, this is a lot to take in, especially when a person is facing emotional challenges and is stuck in a high conflict divorce. What emotions do you see your clients experience as they go through all of this that you have mentioned?
Worry and fear, a loss of sleep, gaining or losing weight, needing therapy or short-term medication to deal with all the stress. There are times when clients see emails from their attorney pop up in their inbox and have a PTSD type reaction, fearing, oh no, what is the latest thing the other side is doing? What's the latest thing he or she now has to do or deal with? And how much is all this costing?
Talking about costs, are the financial costs high for litigation?
Astronomical. Each side in Northern Virginia will easily spend tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars to fully litigate a divorce case. There is usually a large advance deposit that's required that the attorney bills against. So each month for a client in litigation, he or she will get an invoice subtracting from their initial deposit the monies earned by their attorney over the past month for all of the hearings and trial preparation. And that initial deposit often has to be replenished. The parties literally see their hard-earned money disappearing.
This indeed is a lot. And if a couple has children, the financial burden can be unimaginable. Rachel, are there any other emotional considerations for our clients in litigation?
Having to give up and make time, all the time that is spent preparing for preliminary hearings on various motions and the ultimate final hearings. People going through a litigated divorce have to spend a very significant amount of time meeting with his or her attorney, discussing strategy, becoming educated as to the law, listening to the various options, choosing which option is appropriate, answering all the requests for information from the other side, which can involve compiling hundreds of pages of documents, reviewing the information from the other side, which can involve reviewing hundreds of pages of documents, preparing for and attending depositions, having pre-trial conferences, and the attendant preparation for those hearings, litigating the 2-day custody hearing, and then a month later, the 2 or 3 day final divorce hearing. That is a lot of time missed from work or taken away from trying to get on a new life path.
This is a lot of time. So after a hearing, a judge is going to make rulings, right?
Yes.
And what emotions do you see your clients go through when there are court rulings?
The thing about having a court hearing is that you don't know how it will turn out. There are many issues the judge will rule on, maybe 10 or 20 or more different matters. And more often than not, both parties are unhappy with some of those rulings. But sometimes one party is more unhappy than the other. And that is where, on very rare occasion, there will be yelling and crying in the hallways of the courthouse and other emotional breakdowns. More often than not, for someone who did not get what he or she wanted, there are feelings of shock, bewilderment, and anger. And that anger can be directed towards the judge, towards the other party, towards the witnesses who didn't say perhaps what that person wanted them to say, towards the attorneys, and perhaps towards oneself. The shock and the bewilderment can be overwhelming as someone struggles to accept the rulings of the court, or there is a substantial win and a feeling of vindication, relief, and joy.
Emotionally, what is involved in accepting rulings from a judge when the outcome that the person has wished for isn't there?
The rulings have to be accepted. Even if there is an appeal, the rulings have to be accepted unless and until changed, which is extremely rare. If the ruling goes against what someone wanted, they will have to find support and an outlet for their anger and their disappointment. Some need to look for spiritual meanings behind all of it for it to make some sense to them. But there has to be an emphasis on the positive aspects. There are always some positive aspects. It's hard to lose, but a loss has to be accepted.
As we're talking about the outcomes that sometimes people don't get, can you elaborate on those? What sort of unhappy changes or rulings have to be accepted?
When there are minor children, there will be a restructured 2-home family with some sort of a custodial schedule. There will be new relationships with the children based on the different amounts of time that each party will now have with the children compared to what it used to be. A party may be allowed to leave the area with the children or may be prevented from leaving the area with the children. Monies have to be paid, maybe more than someone wants to pay or significantly less than what someone wanted to get.
According to you, are changed relationships with other people part of this adjustment?
Very often. A divorced party may have been used to spending holidays with the other party's family, and now that may be strained. Parties may have had common friends who may have been forced to take sides or felt that they had to take sides. Sometimes those former friends simply abandoned both parties. So the relationships with family and friends have to be changed and redefined. There may also be an adjustment to being alone during holidays when the other parent has the children, and often an adjustment to a parent's new significant other.
Coming towards the most sensitive topic, children. So children go through an emotional process as well, correct?
Certainly, the divorce and the separation leading up to the divorce has had an effect on the children. Some parents ignored the emotional effect on their children, being caught up in their own drama. Other parents own their children's upset to a very high degree and try to fix it. Healing will take time and effort.
Can these emotions get more complicated when one party begins a new romantic relationship?
Some divorcing couples are mature and accepting and convey that view to their children, who accept the new person as another person to love them. Some children are lucky to have both a parent and a step-parent who both care for them when everyone gets along, or even two parents and two step-parents, and maybe double the grandparents, an extra half or step siblings. Other times, the children are exposed to the anger of a parent over the other's new relationship. And at times, a very angry parent will engage in parental alienation, which is extremely hurtful and sad to see.
Exactly. It can affect the entire childhood. Plus, those children can internalize these experiences, and when they grow up, they can exert similar behaviors. Rachel, have you seen clients express feelings of guilt or shame over being divorced?
Yes, as we discussed in our previous sessions, some cultures and religious structures stigmatize those who choose to be divorced or who have been left by their spouse. For some, it is an emotional journey towards self-acceptance and compassion for themselves, to understand that the decisions they made were correct, even if everyone around them said otherwise. Those are life lessons to learn as one goes through the process of self-discovery.
What final thoughts do you have regarding the emotional aspect of divorce on those going through it?
In going through a divorce, one has the chance to define their path moving forward as a liberating experience. You must look at it that way. Move forward and don't live in the past. But you do have the right to hold on to memories of legitimate good times. No matter how the marriage ended, those times were good and they deserve to be remembered in that way. My strongest advice would be to understand that the divorce experience does not take away from you. Divorce helps to create the whole person that you are and that you have become.
Yes, absolutely. It's time to really push aside the cultural and societal factors and see positive side of regaining the power that is lost to keep a relationship going, even though it has become extremely negative. Well, thank you for your time today, Rachel, discussing part 2 of the emotional aspects of divorce.
Thank you, Hira. It has been my pleasure.
You wrote a book on divorce. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
The 4 Ways of Divorce, now in its 2nd edition, is available on Kindle and in paperback through Amazon. The book is very readable and will help you get started.
Great. How can people find you, Rachel?
I'm at www.virk-law.com. The website has a lot of good information, including a 2-minute video with a script on how to tell the children about an upcoming separation and divorce.
Thank you again, Rachel. This has been quite interesting. I encourage anyone who has not listened to the first part of this discussion to look at part 1 of the emotional aspects of divorce with Rachel Virk. This is Hira Rehman with Be Eminent. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Virtual U.S. Attorney Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share the podcast with your friends. The Virtual U.S. Attorney Podcast is available on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and many other streaming platforms. If you are interested in being on the show as a guest or having my team do your marketing, please email me at hira@beeminent.com. That's HIRA@BEEMINENT.com. The views expressed by the participants of this program are their own. None of the content should be considered as legal advice. As always, consult with an attorney. To get in touch with any of our guests, visit us at www.virtualusattorney.com. See you on the next episode. This session is adjourned.